So
And
he
this
definitely has the pedigree, and then working with Alfred North Whitehead and these other guys.
OSS
Yeah.
connections during
Oh,
World War
look.
II. He left Harvard and worked for
Oh,
Lieutenant
dude,
Colonel.
there's the Langer report right there. Okay, so in 1943, Murray helped to complete the analysis of the personality of Adolf Hitler. The OSS, it's the Langer report, is what it's called, right? And in that report, which is propaganda, if you will open that report in a second, in there, it makes the accusation. Now, this is the OSS creating psychological warfare to undermine Hitler. In that Langer report, it claims that Hitler's mother is related to the Rothschilds via the Schicklgrubers or something like that. And they made it up because they're like, this will make them go crazy. So that's a really interesting piece of history for him to be involved in prior to MK Ultra, which is Nazi research experiments and technology brought back under Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, I mean, the report stated, quote, the belief that Hitler is homosexual has probably developed A, from the fact that he does not show so many feminine characteristics, and B, from the fact there were so many so it made up a bunch of false stories in regards to some of, his Jewish origins, homosexuality, all these sorts of things to sort of drive him insane. And then it goes into his experiments. So let's bring up the Langer report.
But in fact, he was not really related to the Rothschilds historically. This is a ahistorical document that was created as psychological warfare. But if we open the document, I'm willing to bet if we searched Rothschild and or Schicklgruber, we would find that reference, which is pretty hilarious because you got to think of OSS and MI6 sitting around thinking, hey, we're making up fake news about Hitler. What should we do? And that they thought that was funny. They've been making fake news for a long time. It took until Trump to brand it and be like, this is what they're doing. It's fake news. Like this whole report, The Mind of Adolf Hitler, Walter C. Langer, OSS, it's very official and it's completely 100% full of shit.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of Hitler. I'm a fan of actually things that happened. And this is not something that describes something that happened. That's all.
No, 100%. I'm just taking a look here in the book. But before I jump into the book, so let's jump into this. The Mind of Adolf Hitler, the Secret Wartime Report, published in...
Now we're talking about this because Ted Kaczynski's professor who did MK Ultra LSD experiments on him before he did Ted Kaczynski, he did this with Langer.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Nothing. It's his qualifications to handle Ted Kaczynski, just like Jolly and West's qualifications to handle all these people as well. Just like who was that guy? Pasternak with Kanye.
Yeah, Pasternak.
That's another example.
Speaking of
handlers,
which, like, Kanye.
Where is Kanye? He's missing.
He had a number of meltdowns, and he goes to a special UCLA psych ward, out of which Dr. Julian West started at UCLA. I'm not saying there's a connection, but it's
there's no continuity of MK Ultra project still ongoing today at all.
So looking at this is a book about it, but essentially the book contains not only a version of Langer's original report, but also a forward by his brother, the historian William L. Langer, who was chief of research and analysis at the OSS during the war. An introduction by Langer himself, and afterward by the psychoanalytic historian Robert G. L. Waite. The report made several predictions about Hitler's future, which proved to be accurate. Let's see if
because these are the people writing Hitler's script in the first place.
Here it is. The report
there
briefly mentioned some claims that a Rothschild fathered Alois Hitler, Adolf's father, excuse me, who was illegitimate when Hitler's
they're trolling him so hard. They're like, your dad is illegitimate and he was fathered by a Rothschild.
Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry in his past, trying to bring.
All right, so read this paragraph because this is what we came here for. This is the quote from that report.
So it says here, the report briefly mentions some claims that a Rothschild fathered Alois Hitler, Adolf's father, who was illegitimate when Hitler's paternal grandmother, Maria Schicklgruber, supposedly worked as a house servant in Vienna, but concludes, quote, it is absolutely necessary to assume that he had Jewish blood in his veins in order to make a comprehensive picture of his character with its manifold traits and sentiments. From a purely...
No, they said not necessary. It's absolutely, it is not absolutely necessary
it's not
to
absolutely
assume
necessary.
this.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's a fun part of their report. That's what they're saying.
From a purely scientific point of view. Therefore, it is sounder not to base our reconstruction on such slim evidence but to seek firmer foundations. Nevertheless, we can leave it as a possibility, which requires further verification, end quote, which basically means they made it up.
This is the World War II version of the PP dossier, everyone. Okay, this is the Christopher Steele dossier that turned into Russia Gate for 6 years. The same thing going on back then.
Yeah, it gets into purposes and effects, and it sort of whitewashes aspects of it. Langer report was ostensibly an objective analysis of the mind of Adolf Hitler and related aspects of his life and society. Now, people remember what I played. Who was the individual from, that was part of Tarpley's? He talked about Freud and the implementation of behaviorism and Freud's ideas into America and in Europe. I forget the name, but anyways, you can, if you remember that when I played it during the town hall, this sort of comes to view about how unobjective Freud's work was, how much it lacked sort of scientific rigor, how much Carl Jung, his protege, even said like we should consider ourselves more of a religion than a science, and that pissed Freud off. So here they're claiming it's an objective analysis, which is absolutely absurd, of the mind of Hitler as it relates to his life, society, based on materials, interviews, blah, blah, blah. The first words of the OSS report are, quote, "This study is not propagandist in any sense."
Dude, that's a fucking lie. And I'm gonna show you it's a lie in a second. But keep reading, please.
So absurd.
They're gaslighting their audience and playing them like they're stupid. They're CNN. That's what it sounds like. 100%. OSS, CNN, they just changed letters.
It represents an attempt to screen the wealth of contradictory, conflicting, and unreliable material concerning Hitler into strata which will be helpful to the policymakers and those who wish to frame a counter propaganda. So they're framing a counter propaganda, but it's not propagandist. That's a little bit contradictory and circular in nature. So good job, guys. That's a classic Petitio Principi fallacy, or a form of circular reasoning where you read.
That's why they don't invite you to those meetings, Tony.
I mean, this is so bad. They don't even. Anyways, the preface further asserts that despite the quote extremely scant and spotty unquote material for psychological analysis, one was possible due to their informants knowing Hitler well and their descriptions agreeing relatively well with each other, combined with the writer's own clinical experience in dealing with individuals of a similar type. Ernst.
All right, now you're going to bring it home in these next three sentences right here. Go ahead.
Ernst Hoffenstengel.
Yeah.
Hoffenstengel has been noted as likely the main informant, a Harvard-educated German businessman who was an intimate of Adolf Hitler, who was interviewed for several weeks, once returned to the U.S. Others, however, have suggested that the analysis was intended to be useful for propaganda, but they said it was not propaganda. Again,
I know.
Anyway, and psychological warfare. Oh, you mean...
Wait till you find out where it comes from. Go ahead.
You mean like that? Psychological warfare against Nazi Germany, which I got on the record about how the way in which they do it a couple weeks ago, and Rich has read from that book many times. Rich has the first edition, actually. I don't. Anyways, others, however, have suggested that the analysis was intended to be useful for propaganda and quote unquote psychological warfare. Historian and authority on the OSS, Bradley F. Smith, states that Langer's report was known in the OSS as the quote unquote spiced up version, and that the idea originally came from Fred Oshner, the chief of the London station of the OSS Morale Operations Branch. Oh my God.
Oh, the London station of the Double Cross Committee.
Yeah.
So the talking points from London come down that the OSS should compose a dossier on Hitler, a PP Gate. Here's the mind of Adolf Hitler and his dad's illegitimate, and Schicklgruber getting banged by Rothschild, and this whole thing that they paint out, this whole like daytime soap opera drama that they draw out as an objective analysis during fucking wartime, right? I mean, the precedents that they have set, they haven't changed them too much. And the Harvard overlap and the psychological warfare overlap of these characters goes back to Allen Dulles, Nelson Rockefeller, Charles Douglas Jackson, and a whole bunch of infamous people who also had something to do with JFK's assassination. So Nazis and JFK dying, they're not that far apart. MK Ultra's in the middle, and JFK had a little LSD from Mary Meyer, and she later ended up suicided on the freeway, brutally murdered, possibly by her husband on the freeway, because the people that they ran with, who ran assassination teams, didn't like leaky documents like diaries that are being kept and leaking out there, and Watergate and all this sort of stuff that went on. there's a lot of interesting history just like a couple sentences away, but you're not going to get it through USA Today.
That's for sure. Trying to find the I probably won't find it. It's in I had this marked before, but it's in the Psych War. It just shows you the hierarchy, and you'll see how much it coincides with British state departments. Yeah. President of the US, Prime Minister of the UK, the LPCC, OSS, PWE. Yeah. Here.
Yeah, the
shape.
OSS from the get-go was an MI6 project, and then they just improved on that when they created CIA as far as Anglo-American establishment in America. There's there's the org chart.
And then there's this as well.
McClure at the top.
There's Bradley.
And then Eisenhower's over all of these guys because he was the 5-star in charge of SHAEF Psych War.
Yep. So you can see how this whole thing works. Let me go back here and see how it connects, how OSS, how SHAEF works. There's Eisenhower, head of SHAEF. Yep. Commission chiefs of staff, with the two president and prime minister. Giving authority.
So before he was a president of the United States and a 5-star general, he was in charge of propaganda agencies.
That's right. That's exactly right. And then C.D. Jackson goes to the work of Time Life. Becomes CEO
just another propaganda agency, and during peacetime.
Project Mockingbird sort of intimations there. And then he buys a Zapruder film, and nothing to see there, anyone.
Well, he doesn't have to buy it. It's just kept by them because they're in control of stuff. That's all. It just happens like that, Tony. They're Time Life, Skull and Bones. Don't worry about it.
Now, wasn't there a chapter called How the Order Controls Media?
Education.
Well, there's education, but let me just open.
They control the media too. They got Anthony Sutton has a chapter on that too, I'm sure.
Anglo-American establishment, introduction, blah, blah, blah. We're not getting into that. Where's the here? I think,
the content. Yeah.
Chapter 6, The Times. Huh. That's
interesting. The Times is like the New York Times, only it starts in London. It's older and more prestigious and has more influence around the world.
So
nothing to see there.
Importance of controlling the narrative, it seems like back then.
Now, does that have anything to do with powerful people at Oxford making plans for your future? That thing you just referred to?
Oxford and Harvard and in this case Oxford in specific, yeah. So,
did you know that Oxford is based on
All
a
Souls
Mithraic ritual sacrifice site?
Oh, just like the London
Bank of England.
Bank of England, rather. Yeah. Well, they really paid it forward from taking it from the Roman Empire, didn't they? That's they want to remanifest that, I guess, and the ideals of the Kaiser, the Caesar, or the continuation of the divine right of kings. They really took that to heart.
I'm glad we don't need